member of any religion of the book. I am certainly not a Muslim, but I'm a proud infidel. Let's take it from here.
This channel is in your defense, and it's to arm you with thinking as well as techniques and tools to help you defend against violent threats. This is one of them. To quote Mr. Erdogan, who is the leader of a supposedly moderate ally country, Turkey, and his comments about Islam are this: there are no moderate or immoderate Muslims. There is no moderate or immoderate Islam. Islam is Islam. Now, that's important to understand, because when you talk to Muslims in the West, they tend to be apologists for a different way of looking at Islam. We're going to talk about 10 myths that are put forward to explain a moderate version of Islam. The reason this is important is because the progression of the introduction of Islam into a geographic area goes something like this. If they are in small numbers, they want to be treated specially, and they use a technique called taqiyya, which is deception. And the deception is, we've come in peace. Then, as the Muslim population increases and becomes a significant part of the population in which they have introduced themselves, they then start to demand special treatment. We see that happening in Europe in spades. Then, at some point, the population of Muslims becomes the majority, and then the conversation is convert or die. Time to wake up. Another important thing to remember is that of all the Muslims in the world, approximately 15% practice Islam as directed by Muhammad. The other 85% are irrelevant. Remember that. 15% drives the worldwide perception of Islam. Now, there are countries where those 15% live. Where are they? Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Afghanistan, if I hadn't said that already. The usual suspects. Then when you go to the South Pacific or Southeast Asia, you have Indonesia. When people talk about moderate Muslims versus radical Muslims, it's an oxymoron and a dichotomy. There is no such thing. Why? Because the Koran is not open to interpretation. You cannot moderately interpret the contents of the Koran and Hadith to moderate it. A good Muslim follows the Koran as written. All other Muslims, as I said earlier, are irrelevant and just trying to go along to get along. All Muslims are taught in Muslim school, if they go to study Islam in a madrasa or somewhere else in a mosque, they are taught that the Quran has descended verbatim from the Creator Allah through his Prophet Muhammad. Period. This is accepted throughout the Muslim world. So, you either accept that and therefore you're a good Muslim, or you're not. Well, obviously that position has implications. It's important to keep in mind that Allah's words and rules, as in the Koran and the Hadith, are not baskets of vegetables to choose from, meaning you can't obey some and not obey the others. The Quranic verses then are followed for eternity as long as there are humans on the planet or in the universe. No changes are allowed to Allah's rules and words because Allah, as Muslims say, is perfect and His knowledge is absolute. As a result, the words cannot be relative. Again, you can't moderate them. They are what they are, and they are literal. Every word should apply at any time throughout human history. That means from 622 to now. Those who call themselves Muslims but only obey the comfortable verses cannot be considered good Muslims or an authentic representation of Islamic ideology, because they're not living according to the Quran and Muhammad's teaching. They're trying to cherry pick those to go along, to get along, and you end up with good Muslims who are actually following the Quran and the Hadith, and then you have infidels. So anyone who does not follow the Quran, anyone who is not a good Muslim, they're going to get their head cut off right along with the Christians and the Jews. Here are some words that are from Allah that are just not open to interpretation because Islam does not allow for interpretation. Execute those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger Muhammad. Men can marry 4 wives. Again, these are not open to interpretation if you are a good Muslim. Men can have sex with captives. Well, you kind of have that situation in Afghanistan, didn't you? Where some Marines got cranky with some Afghan police for doing bad things to young boys. A man can marry the wife of an adopted son. A woman inherits only half as much as a man does. Here's a good one. Fight with those who do not believe in Islam. Yeah, we see that a lot. Witness testimony of a woman is only half the value of that of a man. Now, these are fundamental Islamic values. They are totally at odds, especially with the values of America. But in Muslim communities, especially some that are recently here to this country, they continue to try to live by these rules. And some get in trouble for doing that. A man can marry girls who have reached puberty or have not reached yet. That is a crime. That's called child abuse. That's called statutory rape in America. But if you're a good Muslim, you're going to find a way to do that. Now, it's also important to understand that unlike Christianity and Judaism and some other religions, Islam is a geopolitical engine. Its goal is to rule the world and spread by force, if necessary, the spread of Islam. That's its goal. That's its stated goal. It is not intended to peacefully coexist. It will do that until there is a critical mass of Muslims who then will use force or use the political engines of the country that they're in or the geographical space that they're in, or like what ISIS is trying to do, basically create their own caliphate out of somebody, two other countries. That's what they'll try to do, because that is what good Muslims do. The Koran is written in Arabic. Now, I don't speak Arabic, but I do research from those who do. And Islam does not mean peace. The uneducated Muslims say that the root word of Islam, the word Islam in Arabic, is al-salam. Oh, well, salam alaikum, right? You know, peace be on you. That is not true. The root word for Islam is al-silm, which means submission. And you hear this argument, it's a religion of peace. No, it's not. It's a religion that requires submission. And the fun part is it calls for good Muslims to not only submit to Allah, but commands them to subdue people of other religions through violence until they are in a full state of submission to Islamic rule. Remember, it's a geopolitical system. So, myth number one, debunked. Islam is not a religion of peace. It is a religion of submission and causing others, infidels, to submit to them. Myth number two, Islam respects women as equals. The short response to that is bullshit. However, the longer explanation is really simple. There is no ambiguity in the Quran or in the Hadith or the history of Muhammad. Women have a subservient role to men, period. That's just the way it is. And remember, you can't reinterpret the Quran just because you need to do that to get along with the country or the place that you're in, until there's enough of you to take. Here's one that I get tired about. Myth number three. Jihad means inner struggle. What a bunch of crap. Only Western Muslims or apologists for Western Muslims claim that. They claim that somehow it's some fluffy fight for inner peace and the struggle that a person has to do with themselves. Not holy war. That's just not true and never has been true. In Arabic, remember, the official language is Arabic, not what some Western folks feel that they have to interpret. In Arabic, it means struggle, and in Islam, the religion, it has always meant holy war. Not some intellectual war, but sword, gun, bomb, war. That's what it means. That's what it's always. Now, just to prove a point, in the Quran, in Surah 4-95, Surah is like a chapter, right? And the lower number is the earlier ones and the higher number are the later ones. And oh, by the way, if there's a conflict in meaning, the higher numbers take precedence over the lower numbers. Now, we'll come back to that in a second. But the fact is, in the Quran, in 4:95, it says, the disabled and the elderly are excluded from jihad. Now, if it was an inner struggle, why would that matter? Come on. Come on. Okay, you might hear from Islamic apologists that there are two meanings to jihad. The inner struggle is the greater jihad and the holy war is the lesser. Most Islamic scholars in the world, by the way, that comes from a single hadith, and most Islamic scholars have agreed that that was made up. Therefore, jihad means and always has meant holy war. Okay, myth number 4. Remember, the first one was Islam means peace, not true. And myth number 4 is Islam is a religion of peace. And the myth says, and these are the apologists again, would say Muhammad was a peaceful man and taught his followers to be peaceful. True Muslims would never act aggressively. True Muslims. The fact is that there is no argument on who the true Muslim is according to the Koran. The Koran is very clear and distinguishes who the true Muslim is, right? Versus the pretender, or in this case, a not good Muslim, or a Western Muslim, or folks that some like to call the moderate Muslim. In Surah 9, remember that's chapter 9, and 9 is higher than any other number, right? So the most recent interpretation in the Quran says the true believer strives and fights with their wealth and their person, while the hypocrites sit at home. Those Muslims who don't do that. Refusing to join the jihad against unbelievers in foreign lands. So if you're not prepared to use yourself and your wealth and your tools and your weapons to go to another land and fight infidels, non-believers, you are not a true Muslim. Now remember, the sequence in the Quran and Hadith is linear. That means this follows this, follows this, follows this. In the last 10 years of Muhammad's life, he had 65 wars against Muslims, other Muslims. When he died, it was kind of crazy, and that's why you have Shiites and Sunnis, by the way. They're still fighting each other. So to say that good Muslims don't fight Muslims, don't kill Muslims, is just, it's nuts. Of course they do. Because one sect is not a true believer. So therefore, by the way, they're not considered innocent. Only Muslims of your flavor are considered innocent. Now, this is something that we need to keep in mind. There is not another religion on the planet that consistently produces terrorism in the name of its God. Islam is the only religion that does that. So when it comes to violence in the name of Islam, those Muslims who like to be perceived as moderate Muslims, or those who we would like to consider as moderate Muslims, they have a lot to ignore. They have a lot to ignore from their holy books and the teachings of Muhammad than the good Muslims who believe in the word of the Quran and of Allah. Next myth is that Islam is tolerant of other religions. The myth is that religious minorities flourished under Islam. Basically, you have your religion, I have mine. The fact is that if you were not a Muslim, not a good Muslim or a true Muslim, but you were of a religion of the book, meaning you were a Jew or you were a Christian, and you didn't want to convert to Islam, you had a choice. Actually, you did have a choice. You could convert, or you could keep your religion, but then the Muslim rulers, they wouldn't allow you to build your churches or your places of worship And you had to pay a tax, which is protection money, so they wouldn't kill you. And in some cases, you had to be publicly identified. The way you cut your hair, you could only wear certain clothes, you could only wear certain colors, but you had to be visibly identified so that people knew you were not a Muslim, but you were the equivalent of a religious philosophical slave. We didn't see that again until the Nazis and the stars that the Jews had to wear. That's how tolerant Islam is to other religions. Here's a good myth, right? Islam is opposed to slavery. Short answer, bullshit. They were the poster child and creator of slavery. I mean, that was their thing. You know, they conquered countries and they enslaved the people. And what was really crappy is when the Arabs moved down into northern Africa, and they were pagan, the black Africans, right? Not the Egyptian. They moved down and enslaved all of those folks, and that went on for 1,300 years. 1,300 years. And to this day, they still think it's cool, right? So slavery is a basic concept inside of the religion of Islam as practiced by good Muslims. There has never, in the entire history of Islam, been an abolitionist movement. Never. To this day, it is still an accepted concept in the religion. Here's another fun myth. Islam is incompatible with terrorism. It's completely incompatible with acts of terrorism. It is against Islam to kill innocent people. They actually said that with a straight face. I mean, here's the trick and the truth, you know. It does say you don't kill innocent people. But you and I aren't considered innocent because we're not Muslim. And in the real deal, we might not be the right Muslim sect. And so we still get killed. Come on. So for the official definition of innocent, right? Anyone who rejects Islam by refusing to convert is not considered to be innocent according to Islamic teaching. So if you're some other religion or no religion, you're screwed. And the worst category, the absolute worst category, Muhammad classified, rhino, Republican in name only, right, kind of thing. Muhammad invented that one. He invented that because he considers a hypocrite a Muslim in name only. So if you carry the title Muslim, you want to label yourself a Muslim, and you do not follow literally the Koran and Hadith, you are the worst of the worst according to Muhammad, and you should be put to death by the most horrendous way possible because you're Muslim in name only. You're giving the brand a bad name. Now, where does all this come from? It's in Surah 9-29. Remember, higher number is the most current. And in 929, Muhammad says that unbelievers should be fought until they convert to Islam or accept the state of subjugation under Islam, or you just kill them off. 929, look it up. Here's a really cool myth. Islam is a democracy. What? Yeah, the myth is that it's totally compatible with democratic principles. The religion itself is a democracy. That one made my head spin around. Just look at Iran. Just look at Iran. Look at Saudi Arabia. and then tell me that Islam supports democracy. The last myth that I'll deal with here is the myth that the Koran is the Muslim counterpart to the Bible. Not even close. The Quran is one of three documents. It's the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sirah. The Quran is written by Muhammad in real time and is the literal word of God or Allah as told to Muhammad. The Hadith are stories and anecdotes about Muhammad's life. And the Sirah is an attempt at a biography, if you will, of Muhammad. So those three would be the equivalent of the Bible, and only loosely. Now, let's look at time. The contents of the Bible were done 600 years before Muhammad was a gleam in anybody's eye. And the final stuff written about Muhammad was 150 years after he died. 600 plus 150 is 750 years. This country, America, is barely 300 years old. Come on. Look at how hard we are to do our own history. No. The Quran is not the equivalent of the Bible or the Torah. So what does this mean? And I'll go through a couple of graphics here. The first is this acceptance of young males between 18 and 29 of the idea that suicide bombing is okay against infidels. The idea that it's okay. So in America, 26% of Americans who identify as Muslim, age 18 to 29, serious military age, believe that suicide bombing is okay. In Britain, it's 35%. In France, it's 42%. It's no wonder that the French are having the issues that they're having right now. When you have almost half of the 18 to 29-year-olds thinking, hey, blow your shit up, that's cool. In Germany, it's 22%, and in Spain, it's 29%. I mean, those are some really scary numbers. Okay, I'm going to do some math in public here. So, Pew, the survey company, research company, surveyed Muslims, and they come up globally and came up with some interesting numbers. One, there's about 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet at the time of this survey. 1.6 billion. Now, if you take a look at the graphic, 36%, that's almost 40% of the worldwide Muslims believe that you should be killed if you become an apostate. That is, you decide, screw this Islam stuff, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go be a Buddhist. 40% say you should be put to death because of that. The next is, hang on a second, let me do more math in public. Now let's talk about adultery. 46%, or almost half, believe you should be killed for adultery. As law. Law. Not, jealous husband killed, but head chopped off by the court, by law. Half. Now here's where you really start to need to pay attention. of the 1.62 billion Muslims in the world, remember that includes American Muslims in this country. It doesn't say moderate, it doesn't say, it says Muslims, right? 68% believe that Sharia law should be the rule. That's almost 70% of all the Muslims in the world. And remember, a lot of those Muslims are they're not living in Iran or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan. But they still believe this. You need to wake up. And here's the last one. Now, some of you guys just cool your jets, because this doesn't apply to you unless you're Muslim, right? But 86% of the Muslims, and this is all the Muslims, male and female, believe that the wife should absolutely obey the husband. What? So in all of those, tell me that any of that is compatible with the values in this country, or any Western country for that matter. None. Now what I'm going to say now is important. One, this is the United States of America. We have a constitution and we have a form of government that we've come to know and love for over 250 years. There are some countries that do not recognize Islam as a bona fide religion and restrict it and regulate it very tightly. In America, Islam is a religion, and therefore its practice by its people is protected by the First Amendment. And for those that worry that where there are concentrations of Muslims practicing Islam, that somehow Sharia law will become the law of that area, is prevented by the First Amendment, which is separation of church and state. Efforts to impose a different geopolitical caliphate in the United States would be met with rigorous constitutional challenge. And if that didn't work, Second Amendment works fine for me. I'm totally not worried. Now, it doesn't matter that those who are good Muslims and really want this stuff will ever get it in this country. They can advocate. We are not France. We are not the EU. We are the United States of America, and we are different than other countries in the world. So I'm not too concerned about that. I don't think that in a neighborhood where someone wants to build a mosque that's like a church, I'm cool with that. No, you cannot have a loudspeaker or a guy yelling to the neighborhood 5 times a day that it's time to pray. That infringes on my rights as a citizen to not be bothered with that shit. Now, you have churches that have bells, but that's music. It tells you the time of day, every hour, every half hour, whatever. It's not a call to prayer. It is not a religious sound coming from whatever church has a steeple and a bell. But to have someone broadcasting to the neighborhood 5 times a day, y'all come and pray now because it's time to do that? No, I'm not down for that. And that would not pass constitutional muster either. Many of the behaviors that some good Muslims would like to do are just crimes in our country. And that's why we have not good Muslims here. Because there has to be in jail if they try to do some of that silly stuff that's done in some of the other countries. So I'm okay with people praying. I don't care what they do, as long as they keep it to themselves. I don't care if they wear different clothes than I do, or their women cover themselves up. Don't care. As long as I can dress the way I want to dress, and whatever the norm is for dress is not offensive. Offensive meaning, in the legal sense, obscene or, inciting to riot, that kind of thing. It also says that insightful language, the call for jihad, that's a non-starter. And where that happens, we in this country have recourse. We have a legal system that we follow to address those kinds of misbehaviors. We also have the Second Amendment. So the lessons that I've just tried to express about the myths of Islam, yes, it is based, and it is the most violent religion left to its own devices in the world. In America, because of our form of government and our set of laws, its practice is constrained. So unless our form of government changes, which I'm not concerned about at all, Muslims can practice Islam as long as they follow that inside of the laws that we have, which are based on the Constitution. So, thanks for watching. Carry on.